with me today as a guest, Dr. Rebecca Masterton, and I welcome her to enter the program. Uh, Thank you for joining me in the program.
Walaikum salam wa rahmatullah. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you. So actually, I attended one of your program, and I was quite impressed that you have, the quite a lot in your basket to share with our listeners and viewers. So before I give your introduction, I want if you can introduce yourself because it's much better than if I give your introduction. How can you introduce yourself?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Well, I converted to Islam in 1999, and I have since my teens questioned the Western secular culture in which I have been raised and gone into many different kinds of studies and research. I did my degree in Japanese language and literature. I did my master's in comparative East Asian and African literature, and I did my doctorate in Islamic literature of West Africa, where I also researched about the imposition of a mentality, a way of life by the French in West Africa. I have also taught at Islamic College in London for 20 years and been involved in media, various TV stations, producing and presenting different shows on Islam. So I have a wide range of interests.
Yeah. About you told that you converted to Islam 1999.
Yeah.
So if I ask you some questions about this, I hope you don't mind. Yeah.
That's fine. Yeah.
Yeah. So the most of the time the people like you are very well learned. People ask the why. What was the reason that you converted to Islam? What was that special thing? And also that special time and point where you decided, no, okay, this is the time I have to go into this path. So can you describe that moment and the feeling and all sort of things if you can?
I think that I was always feeling that in the culture in which I was raised, which was a nice culture, nothing particularly wrong with it, it just lacked knowledge of spiritual dimensions of life. And people around me were mainly concerned just with worldly affairs, just thinking about the world that you see around you. And for me, I always felt as if I'm on the outside looking in. I didn't really fit in with the culture in which I was raised. And from a young age, I kind of saw how our society is artificially constructed. So I was seeking spiritual knowledge, and I was also deeply questioning the artificial culture that I was expected to be a part of. There's an unconscious expectation that you're going to follow a certain path, and like all of your peers and your friends and colleagues, family members. But to me, I just saw that there wasn't a particular point in the culture in which I was raised. Okay, it might be nice on the surface, but what is the point of us living like this? The big questions hadn't been answered, let alone people having knowledge about that. And I did study in Japan when I was 18. I stayed with Japanese family for 3 months. And then after that, I went to Malaysia just for a few days. And that was my first experience of a Muslim environment. And I instinctively felt a lot more comfortable in that environment. So coming into Islam for me was very much a kind of instinctive thing, because at that stage, I hadn't been given any books to read. I didn't know many Muslims. I certainly didn't know any other converts. So I didn't know that converting to Islam was something that people did. I just felt that it made sense. I just feel that in the West, we have lost so much in terms of knowledge of what it is to be a human being. spiritual dimensions of existence, akhlaq,
Mhm.
morality, certainly morality. And so I had Muslim friends. I moved in with a young woman who was Moroccan, British Moroccan, and she was studying Arabic, and we went out to Egypt together. And once I got to Egypt, I didn't want to come back to the West.
Okay.
Yeah. And of course, then I came to the path of Ahl Bayt alayhim salam in 2003. That's a whole other story,
Mhm.
because I didn't know that there were different kind of versions of Islam, we could say. So,
Mhm.
yeah.
Okay, so it is, you talked about the spirituality. Sorry, spirituality. So the like the before converting into Islam, like you were feeling like some people say, some converts say, like we were feeling empty from our heart side, like we were not content. So was it that type of thing, or only it was instinct? Okay, I have to go. I think this is the right path to go in.
It was a very overwhelming kind of realization. So I had studied other books on, say, spirituality, spiritual practices. I had friends who were interested in spiritual development, but it was all very kind of hodgepodge, mix and match, take what you want from it. And when I spent that 6, 7 months in Egypt, I saw how Islam had influenced a whole civilization. It had created a whole civilization, and how belief in Allah was normal. It wasn't questioned. Like in the West now, there's this big debate on whether God exists and so on and so forth. I just found that uh, Islam is a whole body of teachings. It's very straightforward. It's very classical. It's not doesn't have kind of fancy little frills around it in a way that a lot of Western people, they like all the kind of fake spiritual talk. They kind of like all the fancy spiritual, uh, you know, mumbo jumbo, we could almost say. But I found Islam to be very comprehensive, very logical, and very beautiful as well. It has a profound beauty, and it allows you to be both a human being in the material dimension and in the spiritual dimension. So it was from there that when I came back to England, I didn't want to come back, but I had to come back in a sense. And when I came back, that's when I started to do more research. So I came back in 1997 and then did research for 2 years and converted in 1999. Yeah. So initially it was instinctive, but after that, then I started to meet people, discuss, read books, and really kind of get into the study of it.
Mashallah, it's frankly, I'm very blessed that I'm talking to you. I hope you will remember me in your prayers as well.
Inshallah, likewise,
Yeah,
inshallah.
inshallah. So the most of the time when someone convert to Islam or revert to Islam, they face family backlash. Okay, so the family will say, okay, we will not talk to you, or these type of things. They will leave you alone, and you will have a family pressure as well. So will have you faced that pressure, or you were quite lucky to have, okay, you have converted and everyone accepted you in your family? Okay, that's fine. It's your choice to use it.
No, I had
It's a
that
tough
as well.
question.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, bless them. And I appreciate, everything that they did for me as a child. And I mean, my mother passed away in 2013 from cancer. And Alhamdulillah, I mean, they're good people, but definitely it was something very, very strange for them. They found it so hard to accept, and to them, I was just becoming an Arab, and
Especially you're converting in 1999 when the 9/11 was and the time is quite crucial at that time as well.
Yes,
Everyone is thinking the Muslims are terrorists.
yes. I mean, it was already hard in the late 90s. I actually didn't know much about what was going on in the world with regard to Afghanistan or places like that. I knew a little bit, but not much. I mean, Islam hadn't really been, we could say, on my radar much. It wasn't something I thought about or knew about much. And so when I converted, it was purely just because I was just so impressed by the beauty of Islam, the logic of Islam, the fact that it still has so much that we have lost in the West. I mean, it was a really, really emotional issue for me because people don't realize here, the irony is people in the West think that they are free, but I always felt trapped. I always felt trapped and suffocated in a Western culture. And I felt I could breathe in an Islamic environment, in an Islamic culture. So, and of course, like Western people have been brainwashed with a certain idea of what it is to be free and how you should be free. And they've been convinced that they are the best in the world. They have the best culture in the world. They have freedoms that other people don't have. And this must be what everybody wants. And so when you go the opposite way and you actually even consciously reject some of the freedoms that you have, you do reject some of the technical freedoms that you've been given. They just cannot understand why. And so it has always been quite difficult for them to deal with. But I think the younger generations coming up in the family have a different attitude because it's a different world now, 20 years on. So they have Muslim friends at university and they've, got more of an open mind. So with the next generations coming up, it's been easier.
But if we think about the current environment, and especially nowadays, I'm looking at you, mashallah, you are wearing a hijab. But nowadays, everyone is the against this hijab. So much people are talking about the hijab. That why these people are wearing hijab. Like you said you have the liberty. Like you have taken this yourself. No one is forcing you to do it. Even the Islam is not forcing you to do it. Islam is telling you, and you are accepting it.
Yeah.
So how can we tell these people that if any Muslim woman, she is wearing hijab, it's not her husband is forcing her, or her brother, or anyone is forcing her. He's taking by her own will. It's not for enforced thing like the people think here.
Yeah, I mean, it's in a way, Islam is a worldview that people need to understand. And when I was in Egypt in the 90s, how I saw hijab back then was that, oh, it's just in some ways an item of clothing. Like it's not this big deal that it's been made out to be. I saw it as it's a norm. It's like it's not an issue. We have, history of women from all different cultures going back 2, 3, 4, 5,000 years of it being normal for women to cover their hair. That was the norm. And it's only really with, again, we're going to talk a little bit about colonialism, but it's only with kind of modernity and colonialism and Europe changing, that has made the rest of the world kind of question themselves as well. And so I do think that sometimes the hijab has been made unnecessarily an object of discussion. It's been weaponized, and people have been made very, very conscious of it. And it's also a distraction from the real, more important issues, I would say. There are so many more important issues that we need to think about. And so for me, it was just, again, it was logical. It made sense to me. If we're trying to promote a moral society where spiritual development is the priority here, then everything needs to be geared towards spiritual development and cultivation. And that means you implement modesty in the society. You minimize the distractions, and that allows people to focus on cultivating themselves within. Yeah.
Okay. We have to go on to the break. And for my listeners, we are with Dr. Rebecca. And if you someone want to call us, they can call us 07. They can call us on the studio number. And we are going on to the break. After the break, we will discuss about the colonialism, col- colony, the British colony. I don't know why this word is not coming out of my mouth. So,
It's a bit
so
tricky.
I'm trying to bring this word on my word. So after that, inshallah, we will meet after the break. Till then, assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to Revive FM 94.2. I'm your host, Nawaz Rajapakistani, with your weekly program, Signature Talk. And today is with me, Dr. Rebecca, and we're talking about the colonialism, especially about the British colony. And we would talk about, I will say, I want to talk about and take knowledge from you about British, when they were ruling India and Pakistan, that colony, because they were the colony of Britain as well. I spoken to I spoken to one of the author, Yaqub Nizami. He did wrote a book on Pakistan, say Englistan, I mean from Pakistan to England, and he discussed about this British colony, and he said, at that point I understand, I realized that no, the India and Pakistan and that colony, they were quite rich as well. Like nowadays we think, like we generation, we think like we were like this, like we are, sorry to say it sometimes feel we are dumb as compared to these, the white and English people. So he told me that, when in 1600, when the first Portuguese ship landed in India, the combined India, and when they went there and they saw, oh, this is this is a very rich place, and the people like to go there to earn some good money. Like the people now from India and Pakistan, they are coming into this country and they're trying to earn the money. So if you can tell us about the history, so that we people knows actually what has happened from 1600 till now with this colonialism in these countries.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Yes. So I have studied colonialism in South Asia and also Africa, particularly the methods that were used by the British and the French. So we see that the whole process started by engaging in trade. And as we know, India allowed the East India Trading Company to settle there. That was approved by Elizabeth I of England. She gave her official stamp of approval for the East India Company to exclusively engage in trade with India. And yes, India was massively wealthy. I think there was a report that came out recently that calculated in today's terms how much wealth has been extracted out of what is now India and Pakistan. And it's something like 470 million pounds or dollars, if not more. I need to get the statistics for that. So they worked in different ways. First of all, you start off with trade, and then you start to exploit the weaknesses of that nation. So if you see that the nations are being ruled by different clans, different families, and different tribes, each of whom want power, then what the people that eventually became the British, they were good at exploiting these differences. So they would befriend people. This is one thing that they do. They still do that today. They will befriend you. They will behave like they're very trustworthy, that they have your interests at heart. I mean, nowadays people still think that, say, the British are very honest and straightforward people. I've been quite surprised at hearing this opinion of the British even today by people whose lands were occupied by the British. And then what they will do is they essentially will stab people in the back. I mean, this is, their method, that they always have a strategy. And people, say, in the subcontinent were not aware of the strategies that were being used for deceiving and duping the populations. I think also that, because they won over people's trust, and they still do that today, they win over people's trust in terms of, they kind of convince people that they will be the best people to manage their affairs. This is what the East India Company did with regard to landlords in the subcontinent. They said that we have a much better method of collecting taxes from people living on your land. Allow us to manage your economy, and then we can get a cut. We can, this is a deal we can do. And they did the same in Egypt. When Egypt was kind of suffering under Ottoman decadence. So this is another mistake that people have made in Muslim countries, is they have become decadent. They have started to neglect their people. They have started to develop a love of position and wealth for themselves. And this is a weakness that is exploited by the British. So, they have misspent the wealth of their country. This is what happened in Saudi as well. And so the British say that, we can see that your economy is weak, it's crumbling. And this is making the people angry and restless. And now your position is under threat from a potential revolution. So we will help you to manage your economy. We will pacify the people, and we will support you in your domination of your people. And so the elites say, yeah, that sounds good. You manage things for us. We can keep our position. And we will keep our own people down so that we can maintain our position. But then eventually what would happen is that the British would oust, they would stab these people in the back that they'd made the deal with, and they would take over their position. They would take over their land. They would still give them kind of like the outward show of being in position. So like the Nawabs in India, they eventually appropriated their property, and then they would give them a little bit back. So they would take their land, they would take their wealth, they would encourage them to invest their wealth in European banks, and then they would freeze the wealth that was in those European banks. And today we still have Swiss banks that have billions of dollars that were taken from India, from India's elite. And then they would give a little bit back. So, okay, you can have this crumbling palace. You can have your crumbling palace. You can have your fancy clothes, and a few servants. And you can look like you're still a prince. And this is what people accepted. So I would say it's not just in terms of like we need to blame the British, but also it's that people allowed it to happen. And this is what is happening today still. The situation is that people are allowing it to happen still today. This is the problem.
I was thinking, like in India and Pakistan, they at the time, like in 1600 and 1700, they didn't use the force. They used this trading company. It's still very strange, like how it came out of their hands and they got into these British hands totally. Like I don't understand this logic at all. It is a trading company, but still, they have the army, they have the forces. How
Yeah.
come they have, they controlled those people so that they cannot control the country?
Yeah, I mean, I think what the British did was initially they start with trade, and then they follow that up with arms. So So they start out being friends, and then eventually they start to corner these nawabs or these lords or these princes, and then they can threaten to use firepower. And what the British did was they exploited divisions between South India and North India, between the Hindus and Muslims. They exploited those differences. And yes, there is this big question of how the East India Company managed to build up one of the biggest armies in India. Why they recruited from among Muslims and Hindus and Sikhs, and how they had been allowed to do that. I can only say that these, again, because of the infighting between the elites in India, they simply had fewer men to make up the army and fewer resources between themselves, and these differences were exploited. I think also, as I've heard from there's was one from way back. There was a British person who was interviewed about how the British managed to gain a foothold in this massive continent. You know, I mean, Britain is like this little island, and
Yeah.
they managed to take over a massively wealthy continent. And part of that was through bluffing. So part of that was through presenting themselves as more powerful than they were, and convincing people that they had greater skills, they were better people. I mean, what they did in Africa, as I was saying the other day, when they were occupying Africa, British and French did this, was that they never allowed people in Africa to see them getting sick. So if they got ill from any local disease, they would be packed off and sent back to Europe. So local people never saw them get sick and didn't see them die. So they thought, wow, these people are so strong, they're so efficient, they don't get sick, they don't die. And it wasn't until they got recruited into the armies in Europe in the First World War that they realized that Europeans are no different from anybody else. They get sick, they die, they they get upset there. And they also discovered, oh, there are poor Europeans as well. Not all Europeans are wealthy. So in essence, the British managed to create this image that they are wealthy, sophisticated, efficient, and they just managed to kind of bluff their way in.
Have they
And
used the same technique in African countries as well? Like East India Company and this type of bluff and things, like they have used in the same way in the African countries. And what about the France? Because Algeria and these countries were the France colony as well.
yes, so France occupied countries in West Africa and also North Africa. One of the most famous countries they occupied up until the 60s was Algeria. So again, that's a massive amount of land that they occupied. And they worked on different fronts. So again, they would send in traders. Then they followed that up with priests. So they were in essence using religion to control other people. And again, they exploited the differences. So in Africa as well, you had these very big Sufi orders, Qadariya, Tijaniya, and they also had their differences. So the Tijaniya, they were split into different groups among different shiur. The Qadariya were also split as well. And so then what the occupiers would do, the French or the British, they would basically find out who's willing to work with them against their own people. And so then they would, and again, it's doing deals. So like the Tijaniya, they would find, they would see that there's an argument between two branches of the Tijaniya, and they would say, we will back your side, we will give you weapons, we will give you funding, if you, in return, work with us and allow us to exploit your resources. And so it was always like kind of deals being done. And then the firepower. So eventually, the Europeans bring their armies in, and then they start to do things like bring in a state of emergency, like what happened in Algeria. They prevent people from engaging in large gatherings, and they will arrest them, they will imprison them. They built prisons, they were executing people. So once they prevented people from meeting, like you can't have more than 4 people meeting. If you do, you'll be arrested and imprisoned and executed. Then you're limiting how much people can communicate with each other. This
Okay.
happened in Algeria as well.
Okay, at the moment, we will go on to the break, and after
Yeah.
the break, I want to discuss the effects of these, the British colony and the France, like they have on the culture of India and Pakistan, like France on the Algeria.
Yeah.
So we want to discuss about the effects of these things on the culture as well. We'll get back to you on after the break. If someone wants to ask a question, they can call us on studio number 0333 444 0940, and they can also send us a text message 0333 444 0940. And I am joined by Dr. Rebecca, so please do call us. See you after the break. Assalamualaikum, welcome back to Revive FM 94.0. I'm your host Nawaz Rajapakistani with your weekly program Signature Talk, and today I am joined by Dr. Rebecca, and we're discussing about the colonialism, and especially now we'll discuss about the effect of this British Empire on the culture of India and Pakistan in particular. So what do you think? How did they affect the culture of India and Pakistan? Did they brought this culture to the Britain as well, or they just they try to impose their culture in India and Pakistan?
Yeah, thank you. Yes, I just wanted to correct the figures that I mentioned earlier about how much was taken from India. So you can find this online. There was some research done by someone called Utsa Patnaik, and it's published by Columbia University Press. And Patnaik calculated that Britain drained a total of nearly 45 trillion from India from 1765 to 1938. And this was done through a scam. So, they managed the economy in such a way that they scammed people out of, this amount of wealth.
45 trillion at that
40,
time. My
yeah.
God.
Well, it's 45 trillion in today's terms. But
In
yeah,
today's
that's
time,
how
okay.
much was scammed out of India, like basically stolen out of India. And that was through a kind of a scam that was run with the monarchy, with the British monarchy. The British monarchy were in on this scam. And so I can recommend for people to do more research into that, because I see comments on, for example, on Twitter, where people say, white British people will say about why people are coming to Britain and taking from Britain's benefit system and so on. And it's like, well, actually,
taking the jobs, especially.
yes, taking our jobs and all of that. And it's like, well, Britain enriched itself by stealing 45 trillion from what was then India. Yeah. And in terms of
Yeah, what else? That's what I was going to ask. What else they have stolen? Like other than this from their culture as well. Like what they have done with the culture, because that is more disastrous than this. The money thing.
Yeah. So actually, the disaster in culture that has been exported around the world was, I would say, also imposed within the West as well. So we have the kind of traditional values of Europe, which were Christian values, family values, we could say, even some kind of spirituality, that was also destroyed. As this report says, part of it was due to the Industrial Revolution. So you have a change in values, kind of like a bourgeoisie arising, the middle class, and then we have the importance of self-enrichment growing, and then of course, the development of science, a type of a science. And after the 1920s, after the First World War in the 1920s, this is when culture really dramatically changed, and we see this actually coming out of Hollywood. So I would say that there is also a kind of group of people working behind the scenes who want to enrich themselves, gain greater power, and they do this by undermining the family. And how they undermine the family is by undermining the position of the woman in the family. And how they do this is to fool women in society by saying that, oh, you don't want to be a wife, you don't want to be a mother in your family, you want to be liberated, you want to be free, you want to be able to be independent of your family and do whatever you want to do, however you want to do it. So in essence, what was preached to women in Europe initially and in United States was that you should be able to do whatever you want when you want. And if it was encouraging them to dislike responsibilities, in a sense, to dislike this role of being a pillar of the society. They see it as oppressive. They want to be able to dance and sing and be a pop star or an actress. They want to be glamorous and they want to be rich, and it's not interesting being a mother. And so this attitude was exported, and I'm still seeing that going on in countries like Turkey. This message, literally like propaganda through the media, is still being put out through different movies, and it's targeting young women particularly, and giving them this impression that they will be much happier if they are on their own and just going after kind of the rich materialistic lifestyle. And actually this is just fooling women into becoming an economic component in part
Exactly.
of the larger economy.
They have made women a commodity, frankly.
Yes, they've commoditized women, and women are still falling for this. They're still falling for they want the status, they want the position, and they don't really want the responsibilities that they used to have. I'm not saying that particularly European women in Britain, yes, they didn't have rights in the 19th century. There were certain rights that they didn't have, but the solution to that is not to actually become a commodity that can be exploited by anybody who wants to come along and exploit you. So this has been exported to Japan. We see now in Japan, because Japan was also on the receiving end of a very intensive modernization program from the 1920s. We now see in Japan massive psychological problems. They've got rid of the traditional religious and family structures and religious practice and spirituality. They've replaced that with materialism, and there's been a breakdown of the family. And now what we have in Japan, I would say, is a lot of mental and psychological problems. A lot. Yeah.
Well, one thing which I again want to ask related to this India and Pakistan,
Yeah.
they have in their culture, in a simple term, I will say, if they see the white person, English person, they will consider him more better than their self. Like they will consider himself as inferior, and this type of inferiority complex is
Yeah.
in every I shouldn't say every single person, but it's most of the time, most of the person, they have this inferiority complex that these the white people or the British people, they are much better than us and they are more intelligent. So this type of complex issue they have. So how can we really bring them out of this stage now? Because it definitely is is stopping them to progress in the world.
Yeah. Well, I would say to people that we need to show the true face of European society, what is going on in European cities. We have drug problems, we have alcohol problems, we have poverty. I met someone who, yes, it was a woman from Comoros, Muslim woman from Comoros. She was raised in Paris, but she came over to study in London. And she said, I never realized until I came to study in London that there's poverty in London and a lack of education. And so what we need to do is, again, work through the media. I've done this on a very small scale on my YouTube channel. I've just got a couple of videos up there where I'm going out in the street in London to try to show the true face of what it is like here. We have youth, whole generations who are totally lost and confused. So the world has been on the receiving end of a false message. I mean, this happened to us in the UK in the 70s. We were getting a lot of movies and TV series coming out of America. So for us in England in the 70s, America was it. Like, everyone wanted to be American. And as kids, when we used to play games together, we used to use American accents. We used to try to speak like an American because, like, America is so great, and it's not until you go there that you realize, oh, this is just a fake image, and that actually there's poverty, there's lack of education, and in fact, United States is in debt. It's in massive debt. So I would say that for people who are listening in on this, if we have any filmmakers out there, if we have any journalists and reporters, if you get the opportunity, try to come over to Europe and try to show the real face of Europe. Especially in Northern England, we have immense poverty up there. We have families of 3 generations who haven't found any work for 3 generations. They've been living on the poverty line for, going back to the 1960s. And so we need to show the true face of this, and we need to also encourage people to go to appreciate the culture that they have lost.
Exactly.
And to appreciate their language, and their literature, their poetry, their history. And it needs to be a collective effort to try to remind people of their great history.
I think we have only 1 minute left, and
Yeah.
if you want to give any message.
So, well, how can we say it in just 1 minute? But I would say to people today that Britain is still using tricks that it used when it was openly colonizing countries, and that to all the young people who are listening in on this show, please do your research into British colonialism, and you will learn how India and Pakistan people were duped and deceived and still are being duped and deceived, and that you need to get back the treasures that you have lost.
Yeah, thank you. And I really thank you for joining me in the show. And I hope in the future as well, you will take some time out and, give us a time so that the people can learn from your research and the experience as well. Inshallah. Yes, if you want to say something.
No, inshallah. Thank you very much for the show. I hope.
Inshallah.
Inshallah.
Inshallah. See you inshallah next week. Till then, assalamu alaikum.
Does your pizza excite you? The London Pizza Depot invites you on a journey with our worldwide